Welcome to this presentation. I'm going to discuss legislation today, and particular privacy and copyright. And legislation is about what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to producing media. For instance, are you allowed to make secret recordings? But it's also about being creative. How can I do what I want to do? What can I do with what I have at my disposal? For instance, can I record in a shopping mall, an interior? Moreover, these rules of the game, this legislation, they protect you as a maker. They help you in becoming the owner of your audiovisual production. For instance, in this film, Little Miss Sunshine, there's music there, music that was pre-produced, and it is someone else's music. But also children are participating as actors. There's also an interior of an institution, and it requires permission. And for all these things, we have a declaration of consent that I will upload. But these are all interesting things that help you in not only your production process, but also in retaining your rights as maker. So let's say that I'm your client. I want you to produce a film for me, but I want your permission to publish your film on my platform. So how does that work? Things like that are questions that function as a context here for discussing legislation. Just two quick examples of the importance of legislation. On the left, you see a person who was suspected of murder, and he's confessing this murder on a hidden camera, so it's a secret recording. On the right, you see a children's cartoon, it's called Miffy, and in the middle there's a Chinese imitation with sort of Miffy with a bird's beak. Several things come into play here when it is about making secret recordings. Whether it's allowed or not, that depends on several things. So does it serve a greater interest? Who is being filmed, and is it a criminal or I don't know, a school child? Where was it filmed? Is this criminal filmed in a cafe or on a nudist beach? And where is it shown? Is it shown in a courtroom or is it shown in a cinema? It also depends on the place of this recording in the final editing in a narrative. So is it functions this part as just a mere illustration, or is it a substantiated accusation? All these things are important and make it complex. Just like with this Miffy, the owner wants protection, the maker of this original Miffy cartoon, and states that, or is of the opinion that this Chinese version is a one-on-one copy, just with an added bird's beak. But the Chinese artist, might say this is a reference to this well-known Duck Rabbit drawing that you might be familiar with as a sort of psychological game. In Europe, the judge would most likely say that this Miffy with a beak is not allowed, so that would protect a maker. But legislation is also more complex and broader than this. That's why I want to discuss all these aspects today. And I've divided it up into three parts. The first one is your production. You're going to make a film, and you have to keep these aspects into account. The second part is your work process, so the production process, the making of your film. And then lastly, there are some special situations. One thing to keep in mind is that legislation applies to everyone, but that situations can differ. So judges have to explain laws, which means that as a consequence there can always be exceptions because situations are slightly different. And even when it concerns European law or EU law, things can be interpreted slightly different from one country to the next. So with everything that we discuss here in this presentation, keep in mind that this legislation provides direction, but there's always room for interpretation. Okay, let's start with copyright. There's the English word copyright, the Dutch word auteursrecht. In German-speaking countries, they have the word Urheberrecht. In France, it's droit d'auteur, etc. So they're usually lumped together under the heading of copyright, but that's a bit confusing because it concerns slightly different legislation in each country, in each jurisdiction. Copyright is a collection of rights that you have as the author. When you produce something, and doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a drawing on your table or whatever, or an entire film, you are the author and you are automatically designed the rights to your work. So you may have seen this copyright symbol before. That is just to stress that there's copyright on a certain production, but it's not necessary. As soon as you produce something, as soon as you make something, and that doesn't matter whether it's a photo or a film or a piece of music, whatever, as soon as you express yourself artistically, you are assigned copyright. That means that you as the author can determine how your work is distributed and used. However, there's also a right to quote, and copyright cannot prevent someone else from using the right to quote your work. Keep that in mind. We'll be discussing this right to quote later on. But just for now, know that you are automatically designed the copyright to your artistic creation. As an illustration of the impact of copyright, I've looked at the Eiffel Tower. I was looking in this Shutterstock database. Shutterstock is a site where you can buy pictures. And I was looking at the Eiffel Tower at night pictures. And what I noticed was that were quite a lot of, really a lot of photos of the Eiffel Tower during the day, but the Eiffel Tower at night, there were a lot less pictures. And that got me thinking, why are there quite a lot more of daytime Eiffel Tower pictures? Because there's this freedom of panorama law, which states that you can photograph skylines even if designs are copyrighted. And copyright is therefore, allowed if you have copies made of something that is, or photos made of something that is designed by a person who died more than 70 years ago. That is just a law thing. The copyright expires after 70 years, 70 years of the death of the author. In this case, this Mr. Eiffel. So the copyright has expired. That's, for instance, you can find a legal copy of the Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas. Where else? You could also copy paintings by Rembrandt, copy Van Gogh paintings, etc. In some jurisdictions, by the way, this is not 70 years but 50 or 100 years, so this is something in particular, but there's an end to this copyright after some time after the author has died. So, but if it's legal to copy or to distribute photographs of the Eiffel Tower, that could cost the city of Paris quite a lot of money, because before they used to make some sense of every photo that was distributed. What to do then? They came up with an ingenious solution, and it's also an example of how you can use copyright law in your own advantage. What they did in Paris is have artists design the lighting for the Eiffel Tower. And since I believe it's 1990, so the early 1990s, lighting here has been regarded as a separate work of art. So the copyright the Eiffel Tower, that has expired, but every time you invite an artist to create a work of art in the form of light, there's copyright assigned to this artist for the lighting. And I believe they also do it at the Colosseum in Rome now, the Louvre in Paris. So a very ingenious way of using this copyright law, which also for you means that you have to pay attention to when you film what you want to record. Could be that one part of the day it's legal to use this to film and use that part in your production, and another part of the day that's not the case, that there's copyright assigned to the exterior of a building that for instance, that you want to use in your film. Okay, so you are the owner of your work, but you want to distribute your work. What options do you have? A license or transfer of the rights to your work are possible then. With a license, you give permission to someone else to publish your work, and could also mean that you have to apply for a license if you want to use someone else's publication. For instance, this Mercis company distributes the license to use these Miffy illustrations. Slightly different is the transfer of rights. You can also transfer your copyrights to a new owner, but then the new owner can do whatever they want with your production, your work. There are also sort of mixed forms or part license forms. So it's worthwhile looking into that if you want to distribute your work on a wider scale. You could, for instance, license your audiovisual production in parts for specific users, let's say for schools only, or you could license it for a certain way of publicizing your work. I mean, documentaries in cinemas, for instance, but not on streaming platforms, or license it for certain geographical areas, for instance, only in German-speaking countries or only in Dutch-speaking countries. For you, for your production, it is also interesting to know that there is a database on YouTube of free music. It's the audio library, it's called, on YouTube. You could use that music for free without having to bother with license, or you could make your own music, of course. Okay, if you remember this first slide, this Chinese artist that gave Miffy a beak, in a court case, it was decided that this was not allowed. However, and this is where legislation is always a bit tricky, is that when it comes to adaptations versus parody, there is some sort of wiggle room. It depends on the amount of editing, whether something is considered to be a parody or an adaptation, or whether it's just like with this Chinese Miffy, whether it's only sort of stealing someone else's creative work. For a parody, it's important that something must also be humorous, at least as far as the intentions of the new maker, this parody artist are concerned. Even though not everyone will like it, there has to be an element of humor present. Miffy, for instance, is called Nine in Dutch. So this 9/11, not to everyone's taste, but at least you can see that for this parody maker, there's this element of humor present. In a court case, a judge will look at every edit. So I believe there was a lawsuit with this 9/11 thing, Mercer's not being happy with their Miffy being associated with 9/11, and in a lawsuit, I believe 5 of the 7 edits of Miffy were allowed to. 2 were not different enough from the original material, I believe. So just know that it requires some looking into detail when you want to decide whether something is allowed as an adaptation or parody, or whether it's too close to the original. And to demonstrate also that legislation is ambiguous, there's a discussion about Peter Jackson's film with the title They Shall Not Grow Old. Peter Jackson uses original footage from the Imperial War Museum, and he uses audio from the BBC, but this footage has been colored, sound effects have been edited, there was the use of voice actors, which according to Peter Jackson led to a restored documentary, as he called it, a restored documentary. Archivists and film historians, however, see this adaptation as an artistic reappropriation rather than as a restoration. I will put the link to an interview with Peter Jackson in the description. Just a couple of minutes, I believe 5 minutes or so. Just watch these 5 minutes and form your own opinion on whether a lot is edited and also added to the original material and therefore could be considered, in the words of Jackson, a restored documentary, or as film historians see it, as artistic reappropriation. And regardless of your opinion, this shows that rules, laws, legislation are often open to interpretation. Okay, we already encountered this right to quote. That was when we established that you as a maker are automatically assigned copyright. You are automatically recognized as both as the maker and as the person who is the owner of the work. However, others have the right to quote your work, just as you have this right to quote. For instance, if you want to, in your film, just use a short, short clip of a news program. That's a quote of the original news program. Then the purpose of quoting has to be very clear. Someone can only use your work and you can only use someone else's work if it's clear what the particular use is. And for instance, copying a part of someone else's work just because it was, beautifully filmed, that's not allowed. You have to have a clear goal. For instance, citing your opponent in a debate, or for a review, or an announcement of a film screening. Then you can use a still of this film as a poster, etc. And also you have to cite your source. With this citation here, you have to mention the source. Just as when you use a part of a news program in your film, you have to mention the original film.